It's not my favorite Pocky. I really like the Almond Crush Pocky. That shit's delicious. The strawberry's pretty good. While I eat the Pocky. Bottom left, it is uThermal. Top right, we have Clem. At 1 point, teammates. But uThermal, kind of, it's a bit blurry, I suppose, but initially was let go of, left, I don't know, of Liquid, however you want to officially put it. And then eventually also kind of retired as a full-time pro gamer. It's possible that he had already told Liquid, you know, like, hey, I'm not really going to be committing to StarCraft 100%. And there is some, like, amicable agreement there. We never really got, like, details to that extent, but would not be surprised at all. Team Liquid, a very good organization. Reputation is still very high. And they've always taken care of StarCraft people very well. But anywho, uThermal did eventually retire as a full-time professional gamer. And has instead remained a very high level, sort of semi-pro, because he does not participate in every tournament, but he does still participate in some, obviously. But more really high-level content creator, and it's worked out well for him, so that's cool. We should have really had a earlier era of pro gamer content creation. I think that's actually just really a fact. I think the type of content can't always be the super high quality stuff. Like what Hearthstone is doing at also being a full-time pro gamer is very impressive. Ditto on Mana, but I think even Mana doesn't do as many like super well edited stuff. And yes, Hearthstone as an editor, but it just, yeah, my point is, like, you know, you can't be a pro gamer and like a full-time super high level editor content creator. Sure, I understand that, but for the longest time, pro gamers were just completely adamant to never do anything besides pro game, you know, and the ones who did anything else were very rare. And this was a point of critique made by a few of the personalities in the scene, the casters of the scene. In Control would often go on rants about this, and they kind of be like brushed off. And then MC actually went on a bit of a rant, remarking on how little the professional players do to basically elongate their career, how they don't really take advantage of the things they could be doing. Like, we're talking like posting on Twitter, you know, posting a couple of memes, doing a couple of victory dances, that type of thing. So it's been a long time coming, but we finally have some pro gamer content creators. That has taken up the appropriate amount of time. Now we can talk about the build. uThermal is going for a full-on 1-1-1 setup, many Reapers, many Hellions, and then Liberator proxied in. Clem has gone for a very typical setup, factory expand, rather safe. Absolutely zero scouting, though, so he's going to have no indication, right? He maybe could have, theoretically, sacked a Reaper to see, hey, there's no starport and no command center. But, you know, then you have one less Reaper to defend something else with. Even if it's not surprising, it still has a lot of manpower. You're not even guaranteed a full-on scouts, even if you did try and do that. So you're just gonna have to kind of make do with what you get, and your reaction better be swift as well as precise, which usually for Clem it is. So unfortunately for Clem, the Widow Mine was not so perfectly placed that uThermal couldn't just dodge around it. Now gonna go for the friendly fire, but good retargeting there from Clem, I only assume. There's so much happening there, that's the assumption. And it did not backfire on Clem. Liberator goes into the main base. uThermal racking up 5 SCV kills so far. Has not quite made up for that lack of natural command center. In fact, not really whatsoever. Only up by... No, he's down. So yeah, definitely not. Definitely not made up for the command center. Oh, he's still behind by 2 workers. Command center of uThermal's is just over halfway done. A little bit more lost mining time. Okay, sure, but this is not done the damage I think uThermal wanted. Against much worse Terrans, I can guarantee that has occasionally just straight up won the game. But in this case, it did not even do the damage that it needed. So, mass repair, try and buy some time while the units come over. Need more SCVs, hey, it's something, but it's not enough. So now that we've witnessed that portion of the game end, I can talk a little bit more about the actual changes for the patch, right? So first and foremost, the Raven. Basically, the Raven's the big one. The Cyclone has also been changed in its damage when it gets its upgrade, but you don't really see the upgrade too often in TVT, so that's not super important to talk about. It really is the Raven. The Raven is cheaper, it's faster to build, its auto turret is less effective though, as well as its anti-armor missile. So if you're behind in the times, it's not the increase in energy cost, it is the new one, exclamation point, new patch, in which the auto turrets have less armor, less health, last less, and one more thing that I'm forgetting. Damage outputs change as well, like everything really got changed in the auto turret. And Showtime showed up, which was very nice of him, and said that apparently the concern was the harassment options, which I thought was important to point out, as we had the Ravens literally fly by and do some harassment. We'll get into that after we watch what it might even be sometimes the end of the game. Now, the auto turret nerf is, I think, very noticeable even right then and there. After so many years of having the old turret, I still get shocked at how quickly they kill shit. So, when I was not shocked at how quickly they killed it and the fact that it didn't kill it, I feel like you can already see some of the differences. To get really specific, as the game is not over, but it is definitely Clem favored. We had this Raven, auto turret duration reduced by 2.2 seconds, health reduced by 50, armor reduced by 1, sorry. And then it's no longer affected by Neocell armor, because the damage wasn't changed. I was iffy on that one. But the opportunity to kill the auto turret has definitely changed. It still has a lot of its other features, such as having high threats priority. It is something you can add a little SimCity to, so uThermal uses it to block out the Cyclone from retreating. And it is still spammable, because they reverted the energy changes to the Raven. But it just isn't as effective, because you can actually, I mean, basically, you can kill it. You can kill it before it causes too much damage. You can kill it kind of in general. So many times you would see people say, like, why even try? Just run away. uThermal going up to 5 Ravens, by the way. He's continuing to build Ravens. And from the starport that's proxied as well. Gonna go right into mass air. So someone came in and said that he was gonna do this. Seems like he was on the money. So that's interesting then. Let's talk about that side of things for a second. Clem basically did the norm. 2 to 3 Ravens is the norm. 1 to 3 Ravens. 3 Ravens might be the new norm because it's just so much cheaper and easier to get. Because there's still also, the fact that they're faster is also really important. Because cheaper is one thing, but then the amount of time they spend on your starport is another important aspect for Terrans. So if you get both, I mean, you just, yeah, I'd say that there's no reason not to get 3 at this point. Because they're still good. The auto turret might be nerfed in its sturdiness. This is the word we're going to use. But you still get a lot of value from it. And it still has interference matrix, which lasts 11 seconds, no longer nerfed. And anti-armor missile is still effective, even if it's reduced by 1. It's also a bit of a different color, apparently. Now, the mass starport thing. This is what's more interesting to talk about, I suppose. This was already starting to get played around with in TVT anyways. So we saw a couple of tricky situations where if someone was really committing to a 1-1-1 Raven push right into the Vikings afterwards as well, they get over here, they're kind of like starting to contain you. We had seen the 2 starport response to that. You just inevitably get more Vikings than so they can't really abuse the Viking tank dynamic as much. And they'd go less on Ravens if they did that too. Yeah. That might change. No, too detailed. Then we also had just, yeah, exactly what uThermal's doing, but with less Ravens. But you skip the factory portion, you go into starports. We also had a little bit of that being experimented with, I mean, basically the argument being you still have incredibly high quality units because tanks and Vikings combined together are super freaking good. The problem would be that if you played defensively with that, you would eventually be overwhelmed because your tank count's not going to be very high. So usually we'd see that triple starport into a kind of aggression, catching the other Terran before their stamina combat shields is done, before they have a surplus of Marines to get that huge concave and just run around and get surrounds and all that type of good stuff. If you just sat back, I don't think it's actually that great. But then the jury was still kind of out on whether it was going to develop into something or not. And now, obviously, we have the Raven difference. So you can get a lot of Ravens. They're cheaper, they're faster to build. You can still get a lot of Vikings, because your Ravens are going to come in the lots number, so let's say more than 3, faster and cheaper. So you can still go into the Vikings still pretty damn quickly. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Then you have your tank number, which is always going to be reduced because it's one at a time. It's one at a time over a long period of time, though 11 minutes at this point, right? So it's still 10, so that's a good number. Then you have 7 Ravens, which all still have their usual interference matrix, which is kind of the critical part here. But they also have spammable auto turrets. The auto turrets are just easier to kill. They still have that SimCity aspect. They still have that high threat. You have to take care of that unit before you get to the next unit. All in all, so far, listening to my own voice, it seems like this is a pretty slam dunk combination if you can get here. If a lot of other shit happens in this game, oh, then that's a different story. But in fact, the shit that has happened in this game has been detrimental to uThermal. He did not have a particularly great start, but yet here he is, 12 minutes in, kind of looking to bully Clem. Clem is having some struggles, man. Even though he maxed out a lot faster, and he's going to try and use that max out right here, right now, it might not be enough. Auto turrets coming down in mass from uThermal. Clem threw out what he had, you know, and that wasn't very much. And uThermal takes that fight even easily. That wasn't the chonkiest bio army. I think there is still a massive difference when it comes to a bio surround with, let's say, 15 Marauders and 45 Marines. But that was a maxed out Terran army getting a surround. Fairly well timed. Minor improvements, I suppose. And it could not defeat that. My fear was, and still is, that for whatever nerf they do to the Raven, it will be made up for by more Ravens. Because they are cheaper and faster to create. That was always my fear. And it might be very valid. But that's just one TVT. Not gonna say that's the end all be all. Just make one ghost in TVT to EMP the Ravens. Very, extremely difficult to afford that. As well as everything else you need in TVT. Very rarely in StarCraft 2's 12-plus year career has one person said, why don't you just do this? And then the other person, the pro, says, okay. And they do it, and it fixes it. Fixes everything. Fortunately for us, StarCraft 2 is a very complicated game. Some examples of that actually happening do include TY building a Census Tower against Blink Stalkers in Heart of the Swarm. That was a very, very famous one. And I actually think, I know there's one more at the very least, but I can't remember what it was. In the bottom left, it is uThermal. Top right, we have Clem. If someone does think of the time where someone in the community suggested something to a pro and then they did it, please let me know. There supposedly was a suggestion in Here Marine stream, which Here Marine then did not own up to, so I think the jury is still kind of officially out on that one. But apparently in Katowice, I'm pretty sure that was that tournament, someone, like Pig, Roddy, I don't remember who it was talking about how Humorine has actually given a suggestion to fake drop, to send 2 medevacs into the main of the Protoss and then actually attack on the front. Pretty sure that was TVP as well. I'm like 80% sure on all these things that I'm saying. And then he actually did it in Katowice. And when, because yeah, it must have been Roddy said it and then Pig was the interviewer that day. Because I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Anyways, whoever interviewed him asked about it. And then Humorine did not mention that he got it from the community. So that's what I mean by like officially. We don't actually know. That was the story. Katowice 2022. We can officially say last year, by the way. Which, it's always a bit funky when seasons go over the year change. Because, you know, if I said this year's Katowice, some would take it as literally the year of 2022. And others would take it as, like, I might talk about the season, which would be 2023. And it's like... Anyways. We do have uThermal going for 1 racks expand high grounds, making it a little bit safe. Also doing an SCV scout. His SCV scout did, in fact, see that it was a block. Not that it was a second barrack. So, uThermal knows effectively nothing. He knows that it's not a 1 racks expand, most likely, and even then, occasionally you see some real head games. Mind games is what people usually say. But he was so close to being able to see this. That's so unfortunate. Clem probably getting the best case scenario right now. He's technically 2 racksing, not in proxy. A 1 racks expands Terran. He might not have expected this. You know, I'd say on Waterfall, especially, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to face a factory expander, and the question then is like, is he gonna go in a reactor very quickly? Is he gonna go into something else very quickly? Is he gonna whatever, right? But in this case, it's if it was a 2 racks proxied, well, uThermal would know about it, probably would not have gone from the 1 racks command center. In this case, uThermal technically didn't know it was a 2 racks. Should have been a little surprised, could have been in trouble. Handles it pretty well. I really think this could have been even worse, but 3 SCVs for all this Reaper production and killing 3 of the Reapers too? And obviously the faster command center, we're like, actually... Yeah, it still works out really well for uThermal. Gotta make sure no snowball effect happens. 2 Hellions are on the way though, and I don't think Clem is gonna actually find anything more, so definitely no snowball effect. The only thing Clem finds is a little bit of a scout, right? So he says, okay, you're reactoring out your Hellions. Which he had not seen until that point. Which means, not so much worried about a drop, but you always do have to be, I suppose. So definitely something to worry about. But that they are able to overwhelm you on the front. So tries to get to the jump, hold on to that ramp as long as possible. Can't hold on to it for very long. Now the command center is going to be further delayed. After already being delayed, 3 SCVs get killed, and uThermal's army might be able to skedaddle. The grenade's gonna be thrown down to buy some time, I would assume. uThermal is actually kind of baiting. He's got 2 more Hellions on the way. He wants to take this initiation. No, that is nicely done. He gets this great shot because Clem had just clicked on the Reaper. Fantastic done. Fantastic 30 seconds done right there. And now Clem has very little army once again. It's 12 to 12, but it doesn't look like it, right? Some of that's still in production, which will pop in the nick of time. Thank goodness for that Raven change. But the auto turret at the end of the day can still be avoided, so that is exactly what happened. So uThermal, feeling the momentum, rallies his own Raven across the map, looking for more damage. It's still not going to end the game, but this is all giving uThermal benefits. He has denied the 3rd CC for a long period of time. He has denied SCV mining on the 3rd CC for a long period of time. He has taken his 3-worker lead, which, to be fair, considering how much faster his command center was, seems like it should have been the case. So you can see how important all this extra stuff has been. But now, you know, he's officially kept that income lead, I suppose. He's turned a little bit of that into... We had a spike of Clem, I guess, when uThermal's natural's under attack. But overall, it's turned it into what seems to be faster... Wait, no. Oh, now Clem. Okay. I was gonna say faster barracks. And yes, he does have the third barracks faster. Clem didn't go for a third barracks. 2 with the opener, but then into 2 starport. So he's also trying to change things up. My worry here is that Clem is not super well practiced with this. Obviously, Clem is practiced with the Terran race, so I'm not worrying about his usage of the Ravens. But I am kind of worried about his general usage of this. Clem, at the end of the day, is a pretty typical player. Any changes he makes require at least some knowledge of, professional StarCraft 2 to really understand why they are changes. They're not super, super obvious. Like, the guy doesn't usually go mech, right? Which is super obvious to most people. It's more like, oh, he delayed his 4th and 5th barracks a little bit to get his 3rd CC a little bit faster type of change. Has done some experimentation. And apparently earlier on in the tournament, he did do some experimenting versus someone he probably just thought was an easy victory, to be brutally honest. And now he's doing something, a change up for him for sure, because he wasn't one to do a lot of these 2 starport games. Even as I was saying, they had become a little bit more in the norm. So I don't know. We'll see if we're looking for any noticeable mistakes, basically, from Clem with how he uses this. Again, not that the Ravens directly, he knows how to use Ravens, but more about the kind of pacing of the game. Now, he knows that uThermal has gone into bio with that. That was actually the first reveal that uThermal wasn't doing his mech or his starport mech. So that's something. uThermal had actually scanned the 2 starports prior to that drop. Missed the Ravens a little bit. They tried the drop anyways. Wasn't effective. That's just too much firepower. And here's something that I am a little concerned by watching this unfold. Because so far, this has been the most change. Every other game we've seen on the PTR has been like, okay, this did not affect the game. This did not matter. This is clearly changing things. Is that Ravens are actually super high quality units. Which I think we think of, but we don't necessarily like imagine the implications, right? They are super high quality units. They're a very effective spellcaster, but their problems kind of overtook that. So they weren't really overused. Well, this might not matter. I would say that we saw Clem severely misuse Ravens right there. Wow, he just got bopped. Oof. Not to rub your face in it, but let's look at this again. Let's look at this again. By the way, Clem is going to go into bio afterwards. He had so many Ravens, but he only had 4 tanks at the time. He's not slapping down auto turrets here, which he probably should be doing. And then when he puts down auto turrets, he literally put down like 3 or 4. Yeah, he actually did kind of just straight up misuse Ravens. That's not what I was expecting. And when I say misuse, I'm not trying to make it seem like they're the easiest thing in the world to use, because that's also been a downside of them. Their spellcast range of auto turret has always been very awkward. It's literally 1 range. Yeah, you can see like all of this should have been spammed here. And if you could, you'd literally want to build a wall so the Marines never even get close to the tanks. Something that Clem actually probably couldn't do because auto turrets can't go on ramps, which I have been the victim of many times. Unlike fucking creep tumors. You know, creep tumors didn't used to go on ramps? You know that used to be something that Zerg players had to be frustrated by? And then they got stealth buffed for Heart of the Swarm? Did you guys know that? I'm really feeling unjust because I remember how auto turrets are still the fucking clumsiest spell to use. Inner peace. uThermal just bopped Clem in TVT. At the end of the day, besides the actual Raven misuse, I do think that Clem is going to be more uncomfortable doing these things and experimenting with them, and he's not going to understand a lot of the kind of like the minutia, the details, where uThermal would, because uThermal is always one to experiment. I think that at his core, he is a more flexible, go with the wind type guy. And then I think he also is one that has been experimenting even just for content on like how to use this and what makes it effective. But aside from that big display of how Ravens aren't overpowered, I still would say that I am worried that they're very high quality units. That's their massive drawback of taking forever on a very important structure and costing quite a bit will make them a now plentiful, strong, high quality unit in TVT. And you don't want high quality and high quantity units. One, because they can be overpowered, and two, because it's really boring. Should have Ravened, Matrix all those Ravens. Yeah, that also could have been a choice. It's very clear that he didn't really have an order of operations in his head for the initiation, the engagement. And he maybe wasn't expecting to be engaged upon, honestly. He might have thought that was gonna chill, but yeah.